I wish I had learned this truth many years ago. Be thankful for the days, good and bad.
All right, welcome to another episode of Warrior versus Zombie. And as always, I have an amazing warrior guest for you today, and I'll introduce him to you in a second. But first, let me tell you why you're here, in case you've forgotten over the holidays. Success is a journey, it's not a destination. As warriors, we all have a history of ups and downs, wins and losses that are all part of making us who we are up to this point, and they provide a foundation for our path forward. We all battle our inner zombie as well as those zombies in our world. And in each episode, I interview warriors who are aspiring leaders from all walks of life: entrepreneurs, artists, health practitioners, business owners, literally any inspired leader that has a story to tell. These warriors have a cause, they have unique value, and a vision that goes generations into the future. And today's guest is absolutely no exception. Robert Butwin is an incredible warrior. He's a husband, entrepreneur, author, networker, and founder of Success Strategists. His 40-plus year warrior journey began in his family high school award cheerleading jacket business. I think they kind of started that, Butwin Sportswear and Manufacturing. And he had every expectation of someday running the show. But after working part-time through college, he joined full-time. Then he encountered networking and coaching, which led him into direct sales, speaking, and mentoring. Today, Robert has been a highly sought-after business strategist and networking mentor for over 36 years, where he's also been in the top 0.1% of income earners in his industry. His book, Street Smart Network Marketing, is a must-read for any network marketing professional. Robert Butwin, welcome to Warrior versus Zombie. How are things there on the left coast, as I call it?
Things are amazing. And, I love the title of this because, you're talking about Warrior Zombie. And you started giving a little bit of my background. And I was a zombie without even realizing I was a zombie. Up until a point, and I'll tell you about the turning point because, as you mentioned, our family started the high school award cheerleading jacket business in the 1930s, 1938 to be exact. Yeah, and oldest son, third generation, always expected to run our family business. Now, as I was growing up, my mom, so to speak, forced education down my throat. I didn't see any need for education because what the heck, I'm going to run our family business, but did I go to high school?
Hey, Robert.
Yes.
I can tell you're chomping at the bit here. We're going to get into your story. I want to give the audience a quick break, but you're already adding in the good stuff, the stuff that we're looking for, and I just want to say before we get into, we'll kind of.
I'll stop real quickly.
We'll reboot the story. I want to make sure we get the whole continuity because for the audio audience, we're going to take a quick break. Sure. I want to say that ask a couple of questions just about that. Kind of. So
Sure.
What part of California are you in right now?
Northern California, in the wine country.
Oh, okay. So you get up to Napa and Sonoma and all that stuff.
I'm right there in Sonoma.
Oh man, I love that place. I've been up there a few times. So yeah, so that's I want to give that perspective because a little bit to the audience because you have people from all over the world and I'm in Texas and you're in California and people say, well, you're both in the United States. It's the same and it's not the same. It's we have life experiences. One of which is, I grew up through the traditional expectation of education and all that, and then learned later in life. You actually jumped it a little sooner about entrepreneurism and serving other people and so on. So anyway, so that's pretty cool. So I'm curious is because I'm here in Texas and this is kind of like not into your story, but I want to get this out there because it's yesterday it was 80 degrees here in Dallas.
Yep.
And this morning it's 40 degrees and it's the high today is supposed to be 50. So are you guys getting all that rain that they're getting in California?
Yeah, we're getting the rain, and part of the story, because I came out of Minnesota.
Right.
So
Okay.
we went from Minnesota to Arizona to here. My wife likes to say too cold, too hot, just perfect. And I have been in Texas in January when it's, below zero. And, I've seen this, the temperature swings in the Dallas area.
Yeah. So you're in the area that gets a lot of, and California is very different from the north to the south. I find that interesting as well for people who
Yes.
kind of assume that the United States, if because we've got some international listeners and stuff, and they assume that.
Southern California is wall-to-wall cement, traffic to traffic. Where I'm at is rolling hills, green, and it's beautiful up here.
Yeah. So, well, that's interesting. And the weather today there is nice, I assume, or is it? Looks like you got sun coming in.
Yeah, we got sun coming out. The rain stopped for a short period of time. And, one of the things my wife and I love to do every single day is we go for a 2-mile walk. So I'm
awesome.
expecting to ultimately be out walking in between some of the conversations I'll be having based on my schedule.
Okay, well, great. Well, let's do this. Let's take a real quick break. And when we come back, you had kind of gotten into already your story, which I know you're used to sharing, and I want the audience to hear that. And then we'll be right back. So for those in the audio audience, we'll hear a little bit of our theme song. It's Not the Getting There by Ricky Jean Wright. And we'll be right back with Robert Butwin and Warrior versus Zombie.
But the miles become the teacher while the student learns real slow, traveling blind most of the time. Wherever you go, it's not the getting there, it's the journey every day. It's not a race to see.
All right, we are back, and Robert, I am ready to go. So let's hear your story. How did you get from where you started, which you began a little bit there right out of the box, and I want to hear how you got from there to where you're focused today, and then we'll take another break, and then we'll get into that.
Sounds good. Well, part of the reason why I got into it is because of the title of the show, and most people don't realize they end up settling. And I didn't realize it until I had one of those defining moments. So going back to where I was talking about before, is education was always shoved down my throat. Obviously, I got an education, got a high school, college degree, but I always knew, or I thought I knew, where I was going to end up. I figured I was going to end up running the family business. But the problem was there was too much family in our family business. It was my family, and they weren't necessarily willing to make the changes. My grandmother controlled everything. Even though my dad was president, she was never there. She wanted to make sure all of her grandchildren made approximately the same amount of money. And some of us were producers. Other of my cousins, unfortunately, were not producers. So I'm looking at, because I didn't have the patience, what could I really do in relationship to what I wanted to do? And I had one of these synchronistic kind of moments. I ended up listening to a cassette tape by a guy named Wayne Dyer.
And it was called Wayne, yeah.
Yeah, it was called No Limit Person. And see, what I started to understand is the limits that I allowed to exist in my life, I was responsible for them being there. See, once you take responsibility for what is, you can take it for what will be. But most people settle, the zombie. They end up just existing, living an okay life. So, they're in a state of denial. And I love the acronym of denial, which is don't even notice I am lying. They lie to themselves by just being able to be a zombie throughout the rest of life. But being a warrior, I saw the possibilities. I saw how I limited myself by the fact that I got the degree, but I really didn't get the education I was supposed to. So I started realizing the importance of personal growth, how I could change my mindset by listening to people that had already walked the path that I wanted to walk. People like Jim Rohn, people like Zig Ziglar's, people like Dr. Robert Anthony, Michael Gerber, who wrote The E-Myth. And so as I'm listening to Michael Gerber, and one of the things he starts off in The E-Myth saying 4 to 5 businesses are going to fail in the first 5 years. And he says, of the 20% of you that make it 5 years, he says, don't breathe a sigh of relief. And I'm listening to my self-talk because I knew where I was coming from and where I was going to go. My self-talk said, not me.
Mm-hmm.
Failure was not an option because I knew when, I didn't know, I wasn't sure when, but I knew that I would end up leaving the family business because, we all go through different experiences as we're making that transition. So that I knew I was certain I was going to leave it. So failure was never an option because when I left the family business, the door would never reopen because I was the guy that sort of like wanted to force the changes because I had this vision of where I could see this business could be. So, that's part of where my story began. And that's where I got into the personal growth and development. I started listening to a lot of different things, gathering information so that when I was ready to implement that information, I could implement it in a way that would allow me to create the kind of results that I expected.
Right. And that's, it's amazing to me, and not amazing because I'm kind of, we're very aligned in terms of experience. And I often say, I've got all this education, but I really didn't learn anything until I got into the same communities and mindset coaching and stuff and what they call personal development or whatever. It's really leadership development. It's learning how to be a leader, how to to follow your vision and those kinds of things from some of the same names. Zig is I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of all the guys that you mentioned, Dyer and all of those, and Roan and that's the whole thing. Is it's a lot of, and you mentioned it, that the mindset stuff. Whether your mindset was saying, okay, I'm in a family of entrepreneurs or business owners and I'm supposed to be the heir apparent and I'm going into this and I'm going to take over the business, and you realize, yeah, that's kind of autopilot. That's the zombie brain. That's the thing that you're expected to do, right? When I went to college and got my master's and all that stuff, I was expected to be in the corporate world. My family was proud of me. I mean, I was trained to run a company, it's all that. But then all of a sudden you realize, okay, I'm just going through the motions. I mean, 17 years ago when I retired from the corporate world, I woke up on a plane and felt like a zombie. That's where the zombie came from. By the way, we all are infected. It's kind of like we've got this gene in us, the zombie gene or the zombie infection. And it's just how much control do you let that have, right? And the key is, I use the word always as intention. It sounds like you got very intentional there. So what did you tell me? What is I got the inner mindset, some of the stuff, and you kind of hinted at some of those things, but what were the challenges with your family, with those kinds of things that you had to overcome to continue on that path? Or did you have any? What was the zombies you had to overcome outside of your own mindset?
The biggest thing I had to realize is they weren't willing to embrace change.
Mm-hmm.
I came early on based on somebody that I met. He introduced me to 5 simple, profound words. And that is, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Correct. Yeah.
And I came to the realization, in fact, one of the things, in my mom, and, she told me the story of, I was distantly related to a guy, 60 years ago, he wrote a song, and the song was, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. Well, that was 60 years ago. Now the answers have gone to the cloud. And all you have to do is ask Siri, Google, or Alexa, and they'll give you the answers. But then 2 years thereafter, he wrote a song. And in that song, there was the lyrics, you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone.
Right.
The times are a changing, my friend. So I had to come to the realization that, unless you're changing, you're going to stay stagnant. And if you stay stagnant, your higher quality competitors are getting stronger. So
Right.
you're losing ground. So that was the biggest thing that I had to, and they weren't willing to change.
So
And
how did that business, out of curiosity, how are they doing now? Is the
5 years after I left the business, they went out of business.
Yeah, it's sad. I almost would have bet that was your story, because I turned around a ministry and did some things, and got to a point with the senior pastor, if you will, or the head of that ministry, that where we agreed to disagree. And I sat down and laid out, and again, similar to what you're talking about, right? And I laid it out and said, okay, here's the facts. Here's what it is. If we don't change, we'll be out of business in 5 to 10 years. And unfortunately, 7 years from the day I left that role and moved, they called me back to close it down after being in business for 45 years. And which was one of the saddest things to have to do, to be right about, right? You probably didn't want that for your family, but you knew that you couldn't control the next steps. And so you had to fire that zombie, if you will, and say, okay, I'm not going to ride this plane into the ground, because it's going to crash, right? Aside from the challenges you experienced, and I'm sorry to hear that the family business did go south as you expected. And that's always, it's kind of a, I think we like knowing that what we know, but unfortunately it's things that it's a sad, bittersweet type of thing. I don't know the sweetnesses very much. As you look at the challenges that you've experienced on the 36 years doing coaching, working with folks in your own, even though you're helping other folks as a coach, I mean, I'm a coach. We all need coaches. Coaches need coaches. We should be getting that kind of thing. Any other challenges that you experienced along that journey? Anything else to share?
Yeah, and again, one of the things I learned from Dr. Robert Anthony, there's certain laws we're supposed to learn in life. And until we learn that law, life will continually trip you up in that law. So that happened 3 other times with me, where I met somebody, started working with them, helped them go beyond their comfort level and watch them sabotage the results. And all 3 times, none of those people were able to pick that up. But a good friend of mine and a mentor, Doris Wood, who was president of the MLMIA, used to say, we all have different experiences. Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And the point is, do you use that as a validation of your lack, or do you use it as a stepping stone to create the success? So through my experiences and wisdom of things I've done, and they're not all positive. Sometimes you really learn from when things don't go right. But I've learned a lot of insight of what works or what works, what doesn't work, and what is working today.
Yeah, and I mean, you said something extremely profound there, and we say all the time, is there's no really, when you talk about something working or not working, you either have success in terms of what you tried came through, right? Or you learn something. There's no failure, right? There's nothing that says, okay, we can't do this, right?
Yeah, well, there's an acronym for FAIL, for all I've learned. It's taking the things you've learned and you put it in its proper perspective, and you use it to continually move in the direction where you expect. One of the key words that you use, your intention. What do you intend to really accomplish?
Right.
Because if your intention is clear and you're doing the right things in the right way, ultimately you will arrive.
Absolutely. Well, let's do this. I want to hear. We kind of got your story, and obviously there's so much more to tell. You're like me; we have a lot of story, right? So we could go in so many different directions. But you've laid out some pretty clear zombies. Let's take another quick break for the audio audience, and we're going to come right back. And I want to hear about what your focus is today, why you're doing what you're doing today, your unique value, and what kind of impact you're hoping to have before the journey ends on this planet. So let's take another quick break. We'll hear a little more of Ricky Jean Wright in our theme song, It's Not the Getting There, and we'll be right back with Robert Butwin and Warrior versus Zombie.
It's not a race to see how many people know your name. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there. When you get there, you'll know. Funny how wisdom and youth
All right, we are back.
are always
Robert,
two different
we're going to be great friends. I can tell already. We're going to have a lot more opportunities. In fact, for those listening, if you want to get more of this, you can join us tomorrow. Robert's going to do a mastermind with our Warrior Networking community, and I'm looking forward to that. We're going to be talking about basically thriving or being successful when maybe the economy is not on our side, kind of thing. Talking about, I think you called it the clap method. So I'm looking forward to that. So let's talk about what you're doing today, why you're doing it, what your focus, and so on.
Sure. As far as what I'm doing today, and one of the guys that I was doing some coaching for him, he used to always say that we all have two B days, a birthday and a box day, and in between there's a dash. Mm-hmm. So, and then I was on an event with somebody else, and a guy in the audience asked the guy running the event, what is the meaning of life? And I loved his response. And that's Daniel Rook, and that is to live a life of meaning. Mm-hmm. So what I'm doing today is focusing on how I can make a positive impact based on what other people are doing. I've been very blessed. I made a lot of money. I had passive income, and I'll talk about clap in a minute. But, even though I've had a great life, I know my best is yet to come based on helping other people. Because with all the social media confusion in relationship to what's happening, there's a lot of people that have got this great story, that's got this great intention, that've got things that they can make a positive impact in the world. And obviously the world needs that positive impact. But unfortunately, based on a variety of different things that are going on in their situation, I know I can help them. One of the things I've realized, because I've always believed in multiple streams of income. And, most people, because they've got limited thinking, are only thinking maybe one or two. And so every day I wake up meditating, what is coming through me that I can share with other people that will be beneficial and help other people become more effective. And I came up with an acronym called CLAP. And that's for 4 major streams of income that you should be working on. It doesn't matter how many you've got now, but let me share with you those 4 incomes. Number 1, it's your coaching and consulting income, which is why the C is there. The L is for your leveraged resource income, which is what really network marketing, multi-level marketing, whatever you want to take a look at or call that kind of business is really about. The A is your affiliate program. Your affiliate income, because there's many people that can do things that I don't do, that they're really good at that. And so once I understand what they can do, I've vetted them and I can guide people there. It's like it's cost of acquisition. They're going to, pay me whatever minor percentage that they might give me because I found a customer or client for them. And then the other, the P is your passive income. It was like I started investing when I was making just a ton of money in the stock market back when it was 3,000, because I believe in investing into the quality companies that are making up our country. And then I happen to love sports because, my background. So I start investing in sports memorabilia. Now, along the ways, quite often, and again, I gained very valuable lessons because people that I thought were my friends weren't really not all of them were my friends. Some of them, not a lot, but some of them had self-serving interests. And so I started getting my cards graded, and the guy, was trying to compete with the big boys in that area. Well, actually that brought the value down. But I never allowed that to stop me because, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. We all have different experiences. Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And now I can help other people so that they do not make the same mistakes that I made. So it's living a life of meaning by being of value and service to other entrepreneurs that are serious and committed about making a positive difference.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, my unique, my reason for being these days is to change the world one dream at a time, and it's not just my dream. It's really working with because everybody has an impact. They have desire, right? I mean, we all want to do it. So there's much higher leverage, whether you do it in a, whatever construct you're doing it in, network marketing, anything else, right? There's always an opportunity to help somebody get what they want. Like you say, you can get anything you want. So if it's a secondary thing, my retirement 17 years ago, people don't really even understand, a lot of times is basically retired from making money and then making an impact. And I made a lot of money first to making an impact. And then when money follows, it's a beautiful thing. It's one focusing on other people. And you've described that very well in your own perspective. So what kind of impact are you hoping to have? I know you've got a book, you've got, you're currently helping a lot of different people. If anything were possible, and by the way, as I always say, everything is possible. What kind of impact at the end of the day would you hope to have?
To help others move in the right direction to create the kind of results that they're looking for. I take a look at, and one of the people that I model myself after, a 70-year friend of my mom, Harvey McKay, who wrote the book Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. Now, I would tell you, don't stop digging until you either go to water, because one person that you meet, no matter where it is, one idea that you might hear from. For me, it was a cassette tape. For those of you that are old enough to know what a cassette tape is, it might be today, it's the podcast. One insight based on the fact that you're listening, and then you take action because it made logical sense, because the marketplace will always tell you if you're on track or not. So again, it's how to help people improve their networking, how to help people break through the noise, how to help people be authentic, to create the kind of results that they're looking to create. Because again, the world needs people that are the bright lights that can make a difference based on being authentic and helping other people. Going back to that starfish thrower, which we mentioned, I made a difference to this one as the guy that was throwing the starfish back in, and the little boy came up and questioned, "What are you doing?" It's making a difference. And if I do that, I will live a life of meaning, which I talked about earlier.
One life at a time. I love it. And that's kind of why that's in my thing too. That's one of my wife's favorite stories, by the way. She has starfishes all around, because it is an inspiring thing, because it gets overwhelming when you want to change the world, right? Somebody says, how can you possibly change the world? You're just one person. I say, well, I do that by changing it with you and the next person and the next person and the next person. And since you're still on the planet because I'm helping you, you can pass that on. You can pay that forward. Anyway, well, let's do this. I want to take one more break, hear a little bit more of Ricky Jean Wright for our audio audience, and then we'll come back and I want to hear if we take away anything from this discussion, and there's so much more discussion we could have, and we'll have some more tomorrow for those that haven't gotten enough. But let's come back and help the listening audience know what you would like us to take away. So we'll hear one more snippet of It's Not the Getting There by Ricky Jean Wright. We'll be right back with Robert Butwin and Land the Plane segment of Warrior versus Zombie.
Funny how wisdom and youth are always two different games. The years flew by so fast, is the common human complaint. The memories in our minds turn to diamonds in our soul, and by the grace of God, on down the road we
All
go.
right, Robert. Okay, so I gave you a little bit of a heads up there, and for those, welcome back. So if we take away anything, I mean, you've got such a wealth of story and learnings and zombies you've overcome, all that stuff. If we take away one or two things, whatever we take away, what would you want us to take away from this discussion?
The first thing that I want you to take away is it doesn't matter where you start in life or where you are now. The key is the direction you're headed and where you choose to end up. Life is about the choices we make and about making the modifications if you're slightly off path, but it's understanding where you choose to end up. And that would be the first thing that I'd want people to think about.
Excellent.
And the other thing is, if people like myself, people like yourself can do it, so can you. Again, it's choices and finding the right mentor. Today, it's a lot easier than ever before. You can plug into the information. If you haven't watched the movie, let me give, there's two movies I want to recommend.
Okay.
One of them is It's a Knight's Tale with Keith Ledger.
I like that.
About how you can change your stars.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is Pay It Forward, about this teacher that challenged a 6th grade class to do 3 good deeds that would change the world. And what this one boy did, taking advantage of that challenge. So it's, if you're going to live a life, you want to live a life worth living.
Wow. Well, those are very powerful ones. And like you say, the it's a journey. There's things we all can, at any point along the journey, we can decide and make those good decisions and take those actions around those decisions that lead us on a trajectory that we can't even imagine we maybe never imagined was possible. That's beautiful. So Robert, how do we stay in touch with you? I know that you're now on the Be Connected platform, and we'll continue. I'm happy to work with you, help make that more meaningful to you as we go forward, because that's what I do. I serve my audience just like you do. But beyond that, how's the best way to follow up with you? And by the way, for those listening, we'll post any links or anything that he shares in the show notes, so you can come back to that as well.
The 2 best ways is either email me, and my email is my last name, butwin@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or go to Calendly if you want to have a half-an-hour conversation, which normally I charge, but if they mention your show,
okay,
I'm happy to do it at no cost,
okay,
which is just calendly.com/ my last name, Butwin.
Okay.
And what I want people to remember, my name is Robert Butwin. And with Robert, you do nothing but win.
I love that. Robert, that you do nothing but win. And so, yes. So, Butwin@gmail.com and Calendly with the Butwin / at the end. So that's great. And I'll post those in the show notes as well. Well, Robert, it's been awesome talking to you. We had a little bit but nobody will know it. Listen to this in replay. We had a little challenge, but we made it through. And, that's what warriors do. The zombie says, stop, and use that as an excuse. And we don't tolerate that. There's no excuse for giving up. And so warriors learn that along the way, and I'm sure they'll be inspired by hearing a little bit of your story and how you're striving to it. And I'm sure you'll probably get some uptake, people reaching out to you to chat as we go forward. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow. So with that, for those listening, join us back next Thursday at the same time, 11 Central or 9 a.m. Pacific, like Robert joined us. And we'll be back with another episode of Warrior versus Zombie.
It's not the getting there, it's the journey every day. It's not a race to see how many people know your name. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there, when you get there you'll know. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there, when you get there you'll know.